Ladies and gentlemen, the America First Committee proudly welcomes Charles Lindberg.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I hope you're not all coming to see me. I do not go out to the public as much as I once did. Living your life in front of everyone can attract people who only want to destroy you. But I feel that I must come forth because the conditions that face our country must be addressed. I believe, and I feel that many of you do too, that our country stands on the verge of a disastrous decision. I believe that we must do as our banner says, consider America first. My fame, I must call it that. It rests on an accomplishment of many years ago. I was the first to accomplish something. Others were trying to accomplish this, but I was the first man to fly solo across the Atlantic, New York to Paris. And I did it all in a single-engine plane I dubbed the Spirit of St. Louis, because it was the city of St. Louis that supported the manufacture of that plane. This was a plane built by American hands, by American minds. That was 13 years ago, and since then, aviation has become the most powerful weapon in the American Army arsenal. The question I ask all of you today is this: would our air power be enough to defeat the air power of Germany? Would going to war against Germany be the right thing to do? There are now three forces pushing us into a war, and if any one of them would stop beating their war drums, there would be no chance of us entering this war. But who are they? What do they want? The newspapers. Well, they tell us one thing. But who's behind the papers? What do they want? Our president and his administration tells us another. But what does the president want? What do I want? Why should I be listened to?
From the offices of Rayfield 14. Gentlemen, as a stimulus to the courageous aviators, I desire to offer through the offices and regulations of the Aero Club of America a prize of $25,000 to the first aviator of any allied country crossing the Atlantic in one flight from Paris to New York or New York to Paris.
People have been trying to make that flight for years. The flight across the Atlantic, New York to Paris, in balloons, airships, but people believed that a journey like that was beyond the capabilities of aviation. And at the time it was true. But the prize still called to us, and people were gearing up all over the world for the flight. New York, Paris. Some lives were lost when their planes, carrying the heavy load of fuel you need to make the flight, crashed into flames on takeoff. But I didn't let any failure stop me. I said to myself back then, what kind of man would live where there is no danger? Now, I do not believe in taking foolish chances, but nothing can be achieved by not taking a chance at all. So, I accepted the challenge, and in my mind, I was already in Paris. But getting there, it was one obstacle after another. You see, banks didn't want to back such a risky venture. Getting a bank to back you is a lot like going to court. You have to prove your case, and they assume you're already guilty. Now, I had made the pitch outlining the flight that I wanted to make, and I wait outside the State National Bank in St. Louis, near the office of Harold Bixby. He was the leader of the Chamber of Commerce at the time. He appears. I tried to read his face. Does he give me the $15,000, or does he show me the door? He approaches. He speaks. Well, Slim. That's what they used to call me back then. Well, Slim, you sold us on this proposition of yours. It was as if I had lifted off the ground right then and there, headed to Paris. Now, with financial backing set, I cast around to find a manufacturing company willing and able to create the plane to my specifications. It was Ryan Aeronautics in San Diego. Now, once there, I had to draw their engineers into my concept. No, it can't be one of your modified mail carriers. The spirit of St. Louis has to be special. Here, look, try a longer fuselage thing, because the plane is going to be carrying 400 gallons of gasoline, not bags of mail. A longer fuselage and an adjusted wingspan. No, wait, stop. Not 2 engines. That's what the others are trying. We'll go with 1 engine. It's lighter. Always think lighter. I know. We need more power for takeoff, but a single engine, it can do it. And let the others try to build for 2 pilots. We build for 1. It's lighter. 1 pilot. Me. And the pilot, he goes here, not between the engine and the fuel tanks. I don't want to be caught between the two if I'm forced to land. You're absolutely right. If I'm sitting here, I won't be able to see what's in front of me. It's a problem. A what? A periscope? Where do we put it? On the side of the plane. Of course, that's brilliant! What else will I have with me? Well, we want it to be light, so no parachute, no radio, no gas gauges, no navigational lights, and boots. I need lighter boots! And let's get rid of this heavy leather pilot seat. We'll replace it with a far lighter wicker chair. In what seemed like no time at all, our minds flowed together to forge the perfect plane, the spirit of St. Louis. In May of 1927, 2 Frenchmen, Nguesser and Coley, left Paris in a plane they dubbed l'Abasso Blanc. They were last seen flying over Ireland, and then vanished forever. 2 weeks later, I made my flight. First, England and its leader, Winston Churchill, want us to assist in the fighting of the Germans. How is that our war? How would it end? Of course, England wants us to assist in the fighting of the Germans. It gives them the opportunity to shift a large part of responsibility for waging that war and for paying the cost. And we have all seen how Britain repays its war debts. If it wasn't for America's support in the form of over $2 billion, there would have been no chance of England winning that war. The last great war, and have we been repaid? You know the answer. They have not repaid their debts. They have not paid their fair share for our arms, our support, our soldiers. I have a different outlook toward Europe than most people in America. I'm told not to stand too strongly against the trend of the time. I'm told by those around me that if I want to be effective, I must speak with general approval. This is contrary to the values that I hold most dear. I'm an American. I must say what I believe, or not speak at all. My ideas on the war are risky, and I will take a risk now and tell you America will lose the battle against Germany. Now, some of you may question my patriotism, but no one can question my knowledge of aviation, not even our government. I was sent by our U.S. government to Germany to report back on German aviation, the German Air Force, and while I was there, I met impressive people. People such as Hermann Göring, the Commander-in-Chief of Germany's Air Force. I was the first American allowed to investigate their new secret bombers, the Junkers Ju-88Is. I was actually allowed to pilot the Messerschmitt 109. I walked away from those meetings thoroughly convinced Germany's flying machines would make ours look like puny toys. I also came away from those meetings the recipient of the Commander Cross of the Order of the German Eagle presented to me by Hermann Göring himself, not by Adolf Hitler as newspaper cartoons suggest. England, France, and Germany are not implacable enemies, whose problems can only be solved by war. They are all part of the greater Western civilization. A war between them would be a war between brothers like the great war between Sparta and Athens that destroyed ancient Greece. Trust me. Trust me when I say England has but one thought on their mind when it comes to battling the Germans, and that is the expansion of their empire, which would only bring the rise of Soviet powers. I know the English mind. My wife and I, we moved there. We moved there after that night.
The infamous trial of
It still seems so crude. How did we not hear something? A frail wooden ladder being placed outside of our son's window. I can't forget that night. March 1st. Anne and I were in Hopewell, New Jersey, even though our Jersey home, it wasn't really quite finished yet. The home was back off of the main road. You could only get to it by walking 1.5 miles down a gravel lane, and then it opened up into a clearing. This was our refuge. So we thought, but it wasn't safe. The exact location, the amount of acreage, even the dimensions of the home, they were all printed in newspaper outlets all across the country. It was a large house. It would have been easy for someone to conceal themselves at a distance, observe our comings and goings. There was no shades, there was no curtains. Anyone could have identified where the nursery window was. At night, the house must have seemed like a giant lantern signaling our location. Our young baby, Charlie, was the object of interest of so many people. Anne had been worried about people coming to the house just to see him. You see, reporters wanted to see the baby, and Anne warned us that unless he was watched every moment, anyone would enter our home and take photographs of him. And it wasn't just reporters. There are people out there, people that are just a little bit off. One woman demanded to see our baby, life or death, demanded, entered our home, had to be removed. That night, little Charlie had a cold. We let his nurse attend to him with some medicine on his chest, and then she took him upstairs and laid him down in his bed. Betty Gow, his nurse, laid him in his crib, while Anne was in her bedroom, and I sat downstairs, not knowing, not hearing anything. There was some sound. It was boards from a crate. I mean, no one could have imagined that. It was about 10 p.m. when Mrs. Gow went to check on little Charlie to see if he was safe and well, and of course he wasn't safe, he wasn't well. In a rush, excited and concerned, Mrs. Gow called out to me, "Do you have the baby?" Of course, I knew suddenly something was amiss. Anne didn't have the baby. I did not have the baby. The baby was in his crib where Mrs. Gow had placed him only hours ago. I rushed into his room. Something is wrong. The crib is empty, but the bed sheets are still attached. the bedding standing up. He couldn't have crawled out himself. He was taken through this hole. Taken. I searched this room. There's no signs of him. Wait, what's that on the windowsill? A note. Crude handwriting. Demands. Dear sir, have $50,000 ready. Misspelled. $15,000 and $10 bills, $25,000 and $20 bills, and $10,000 and $5 bills. In 2 to 4 days, we will notify you where to deliver the money. Misspelled. We warn you for making any ding and not anything public or notify the police. The signature is not a signature at all. It's 2 overlapping circles with the intersecting area colored red, and there's 3 holes, one on the left, one on the right, and one in the center. I rush into my room and grab my Springfield rifle and charge to the top of the stairs. Mr. Watley, call the police. Our baby's been kidnapped. I rush into the extremely dark night. I see nothing. It's too dark. I walk the lane. Nothing there. Nothing there. Back into the house. Wait for the police. Don't touch anything. Wait for the police. They come. We go outside underneath the nursery window. Your flashlight, sir. There. What is that? Lying just a few feet away from the home is a ladder. Frail, rickety, crude, handmade. Mud under our feet. Planks of wood on top. Footprints. Holes in the mud. Holes in the mud where the ladder rested against the nursery window. Holes in the mud. The only sign of the man who stole my little eagle. Took him off into the darkest night of my life. America first. America first. We were, and we are. All Americans must know that England is but one of 3 forces pushing us into a war, the second of which is also the most divisive. The newspapers. Sensational stories, headlines meant to inflame you, the public. It is sensationalism that sells papers. Let us not forget, it was newspaper outlets all over the country that would capitalize on the kidnapping of my young child. Their reporters would stalk my wife and I at every turn. They would print headlines meant to tantalize the darkest parts of society. I do not expect the newspapers to look at this war or my knowledge on the subject objectively. Even before my historic flight, the newspapers were never kind, they were never accurate. A few days before the journey, the headlines read, "Flying Fool Hops Today." The newspapers. Such liars. When they couldn't get a photograph of my mother and I next to the Spirit of St. Louis, do you know what they did? They took 2 nobodies, stood them in front of the plane, and then pasted our heads onto their bodies. A composite picture, they call it. A fake. The newspapers. They would now urge us into an unwinnable war against Germany. And yet, the newspapers are but one of the many voices irresponsibly raised to urge us into war. The most persistent of these voices comes from the Jewish communities in our country. Now, it is not difficult to understand why the Jews would wish the overthrow of Nazi Germany. The persecution they suffer is enough to make bitter enemies of any race. But they persist so that the most dangerous thing in our country may be the Jews themselves, their large ownership over our motion pictures, our radio, our press, our government. A few far-sighted Jewish people stand opposed to intervention, but the majority still does not. The motion pictures they control weave stories that urge us into war. The press that they control print headlines that lead us into war, and the government they seek to control petitions for war every day. The Jewish peoples should be opposing our intervention in this war at all costs because it will be the Jews who feel the consequences first in Germany. Do the Jewish people really understand the power of German aviation? Of course not. They know nothing of flight.
He was just a young aviator, and his nerves, they were steady and true. He took many chances and won them, so they called him the Fly.
I had been obsessed with flying since 1912 when I saw my first plane near Washington, D.C. But it wasn't until 1922 when I was close enough to even touch a plane. And that touch, that was just another connection to what was already in my blood. Now, learning to fly at the Nebraska Aircraft Corporation's flying school in Lincoln wasn't exactly hands-on. I did fly there for the first time, as a passenger. But I was never allowed to fly solo. I couldn't post the required damage bond. I got 20 hours of flight training there and decided to buy my own plane for $500. It was an old war surplus plane. Cheap for a plane back then, but I later found out some sold as little as $50 at auction. But even those primitive planes sang to me. Being so high up that the entire world looks different. Sizes are deceptive. Boulders and ditches, they're invisible. Marshes, they look like solid grasslands. I was still in my 20s when I learned how to fly. It was like a fish learning how to swim. Now, flying back then was so strange, so brand new, that you could make a living barnstorming. We'd fly low enough to attract attention. You know, one time, we even threw a dummy filled with mud and straw out of the plane to make people think I'd fallen out. I could usually find a field to land in, and people would come rushing up, and they were full of questions. Well, that hole in the radiator? Well, that's where the propeller shaft goes through. No, the wings aren't made out of catgut, tin, or cast iron. This is a wooden frame, and it's wrapped with linen and cotton, shrunk tight as a drum, with acetate or nitrate dope. What's it feel like to fly a plane? Well, there's only one way to find out, and it's only going to cost you $5. So get in line, and I'll take you up for the experience of your lifetime. Who wants to fly? Everyone's hands shot up. Who wants to go first? About a etiquette. Well, what happened to all those hands that were high in the air? You want to fly, but you don't want to be the first. Want someone else to take the test flight, You there, you look like a brave soul. No? How about you? It took diplomacy, psychology, and a touch of ridicule to get the first person into the cockpit. All right, you hold back on the throttle. I'll turn the tail around and use every foot of space for takeoff. What's that red bandana for? Oh, sure. You want to wave it around so your friends on the ground can see you're having a great time. And we were off. Now, pull back on the throttle. Here we go! I took this man up to 3,000 feet and started giving him a first-class ride. Hold on tight, we're taking our first dive! What are you doing with your head down to the floor like that? You won't see a thing. Keep that red bandana raving, because we're going for a loop! When we landed, he jumped out of the plane and told everybody what a great time he'd had. Everybody lined up, $5 in their hands. Oh, I did it all. Parachuting, even wing walking stunts and fairs. Now, wing walking may have looked dangerous from down below, but in the air it was a real thrill. The dangerous part about wing walking wasn't actually walking on the wings. It was getting out of the cockpit. You see, you're in the slipstream, which is that rush of air that comes over the wings as you move forward. I would climb out of the cockpit in my bare feet, no shoes or stockings, because it gave me better control. I would walk along the forward edge, up to the baby strut, jump up on the top wing, stand on my head, and we'd fly past the grandstands. Oh, nothing could scare me. Not after surviving my first plane crash. Yeah, you heard that right, first. Which means there were others, 5. I joined the Caterpillar Club. It's that group of aviators who successfully bailed from a plane and lived. It was 1925. My plane came crashing down from 300 feet. Landed propeller first, but me? Oh, I landed feet first. Kidnappers torture me with ransom notes. The spelling is better. But the torment continues as I read the second note. Angry with my notifying the police, the kidnappers now request $70,000. The note that followed demanded that we use newspaper ads to communicate. They also requested a go-between, a retired school principal. His name was Dr. John Condon. He came forward, convinced us that he would be the best person to play intermediary between the kidnappers and myself. Dr. Condon used a nickname, Jaffsby, when he placed ads in the Brooklyn Home News. Kidnappers replied with more of their sick requests. Take a car to the last subway station on Jerome Avenue. 1,000 feet on the left-hand side from the last station, there'll be an empty Frankfurter stand with a big open porch around. In the center of the porch, there will be a stone. Underneath the stone, there will be a notice of where you can deliver the money. At 3/4 of an hour, be on the spot, have money with you. That note took us to Woodlawn Cemetery. I watched at a distance as Dr. Condon spoke with a man we came to call Cemetery John. They discussed paying the ransom. Cemetery John said he would provide proof of Charlie's identity. And a few days later, we received a sleeping suit. I instantly recognized it belonging to little Charlie. Seeing that suit filled me with hope and horror to think of what had become of my little eagle. There were more notes. There was more negotiations. More tokens of identity. A thumb guard that Charlie wore the night of the kidnapping. It was found right outside the entrance of our estate by a maid. Finally, on the evening of April 3rd, I accompanied Dr. Condon back to Woodlawn Cemetery, and a ransom of $50,000 was paid to Cemetery John, and we were given a notice on where we could find the baby. It was on a boat named Nellie near Martha's Vineyard. We searched for the boat. We searched for the baby, neither were ever found. Second search, the results were the same. Who sent these notes? There were so many theories about the kidnapping at the time. Was it a servant from our home, Violet Sharp, our maid, Oliver Watley, our butler? Was it organized crime, as the police had suspected? Al Capone, from prison, promised to find my baby if we commuted his sentence. Was it my sister-in-law, Was it my sister-in-law, Elizabeth, out of jealousy? Was it me? Did I kill my own son? Why? Why would I? You know the stories they weave. They say I killed my own son, or that I accidentally dropped him, carrying him down the ladder as part of a joke, a practical joke. It's ludicrous. They would tie his death to my commitment to eugenics. A foot. 1 foot on my son was deformed. He had rickets. It wasn't deformed, really. His toes were twisted. And I would kill my own son? Have him spirited away from the house to some sanitarium? Let another man go to his death because of one small flaw? Why do they say such things against me? Was it my commitment to science? You see, what began as an attempt to save the life of my sister-in-law quickly became the pejorative label of eugenics. I worked with Dr. Alexis Carrel. He was a Nobel Prize-winning doctor on the creation of a profusion pump. It was a mechanical heart, if you will. It saved lives. Its creation merited Dr. Carrel and myself the cover of Times magazines. But is the invention remembered as a modern medical advancement? No. It's greeted with claims that we wanted to ensure the immortality of the elite in our society. They called Dr. Carrel a racist. But try to understand what he meant when he said that all men are not created equal. As democracy, created in the 18th century with no scientific evidence to refute it, would have us believe. Can we all, here and now, see the truth of his statement when he said that we do not know the genesis of great men? Perhaps it would be effective to kill off the worst of us and keep the best, like we do in the breeding of dogs. Don't we all want a better future? A better human race? I once wrote to my daughter, if I could impose anything on my children, from any wisdom that I have gained in this life, it would be the importance of genetics in mating. And there are whispers. Whispers that I fathered children with women other than my wife, and this is true. Yeah. Women of Germany. But aren't my traits worthy of being passed down into our genetic future? Some claim that I'm obsessed with improving the quality of life for future generations. Wouldn't you want that? It is your obligation as American citizens to look at this war objectively, to weigh our chances of success should we enter it. I've attempted to do this today through the standpoint of aviation. I am thoroughly convinced America is not ready to wage war, but one man, either through sheer brash thinking or refusal of reality, will not see the situation for what it is. The third and final force pushing us into this unwinnable war is unfortunately our own president, FDR. FDR knows nothing of aviation, and yet what has he said of me? He calls me a copperhead, that term coined after Northerners who fought for the South in the Civil War. He calls me a German appeaser, a fellow traveler, has publicly stated he believes me a Nazi. He has heard only what he wants to hear. I do not believe that our American ideas, our American way of life will gain through an unsuccessful war, and I believe that America is not ready to wage that war successfully at this time. We should spend this time building up our own armed forces and hoping that others can find a peaceful solution with Germany. FDR disagrees. Faced with his comments, I had no choice but to resign my commission and the United States Army Air Force. This resignation was not something I did easily, because for me, flying has been and remains my greatest passion. To make the flight, the weather had to be almost perfect. And that morning, it wasn't looking great. So I stopped waiting. The team and I were off to a New York theater to see Rio Rita. We decided to stop and make one last phone call. And that's when we got the good news. The ocean weather was clearing. It was a sudden change. It was as if May 20th, 1927 was calling out to be put in the history books. So Rio Rita must wait. And we rushed for a dawn takeoff. The preparations are over. I sit in the pilot's seat, waiting. In front of me, I see the runway. The Atlantic Ocean is just beyond the telephone wires that I must clear or crash. The decision is mine. It all comes down to a nod of my head. You see the shape of my head, the cancellation of the takeoff, but a nod? Well, a nod means go. The balance is always the same. Weather, wind, power, load. I must clear those telephone lines. I must avoid the pools of water on the runway. Is the plane too heavy? Check the tack. Check the wind sunk. Check the distance ahead on the runway where two pilots died when their plane crashed on takeoff. And finally, check my own intuition. Years of barnstorming across the country, landing and taking off in fields hardly ideal as runways. It's time. The decision is mine. I look to the men outside the plane at the blocks and nod. We begin down the runway. The plane feels more like a truck than an airship. I ease the throttle forward. Is it just too heavy? Oh, the engine feels powerful and pulls me forward. The wheels still run along the ruts on the ground, but the landing gear is not made for these speeds. It's going to break down. It's too heavy. We go faster and faster. I lift off and bounce down. I lift off and bounce down again. I lift off and stay aloft over the telephone wires, over the hills on the treeside, over the Atlantic Ocean. It is 7:45 a.m. and the spirit of St. Louis begins its journey into history. Soon, cities and states pass down below me. Long Island, Connecticut shoreline, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I am crossing over the North American shoreline. Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. Sometimes I fly low enough to where my wheels are only feet above the water of the ocean. The ocean, it's not threatening me. It's giving its nod of approval. I realized at the time that Nova Scotia marked the halfway point for me. See, at any point I could have turned back until then. Others had turned back. There was no shame in it. But turning back depended on one important factor. Was there enough fuel to make the return flight home? I felt that the only way forward, the only way was forward. I faced enemies out there. Fog, that was a dreaded obstacle. But as I flew on, an enemy appeared with a siren song that could only bring about my death. I'm here for you, Charles. Your eyes are so tired and dry. Rest them only for a moment. You know you want me. I could ease all the aches you feel being trapped in this tiny cockpit. That's it. Close your eyes and rest. No, keep them shut. Your eyes are so tired. You know you want me. There is nothing better in the world than me. Close your eyes, Charles, and sleep. May 12th. A truck driver has been on the road for hours. He pulls off to the side of the highway to relieve himself in the woods. As he makes his way through the brush, he trips over a burlap sack covered with a thin layer of dirt and dead leaves. Inside the burlap sack, inside the burlap sack, inside the burlap sack is the body of my little eagle. My Charlie. He was lying face down. The back of his little skull was crushed. It was horrible. And it was only 2 miles from our home. All the offers of help, all the letters of demands, all of it was nothing more than lies and frauds. Charlie died the night he was taken. I asked myself over and over again, who could have done this? Who could have been so dull that they thought they could have gotten away with it? He was the most publicized baby in all of America. Surely he knew his kidnapping would bring the ire of the entire country. If he was looking for money, he was under a serious misapprehension. We were not particularly wealthy. The chances of acquiring a large sum, they weren't good. The discovery of such a person, it took some time. Gold certificates, that's what brought him down. When we paid the ransom, we paid in gold certificates. They were easier to trace. The FBI wrote down the tracking numbers, so when one of the certificates showed up at a gas station randomly, they would trace back to a one Bruno Hauptmann. And who was Hauptmann? A German. I know the German people. I admire their efficiency, and I respect the power of their German Air Force. It is time that Roosevelt and his administration respect the German people and understand our war is not people of Germany. German people. Hauptmann was German. And who was Hauptmann? He was a stowaway. He was an illegal alien who had fought against America in the last Great War and now was living unlawfully among us as a carpenter. His arrest emphasized, as the news of the day said, the need to deport all illegal aliens who come to this country and commit crime. The trial attracted reporters and gawkers from all over the country. Outside of the courthouse, vendors hawked miniature kidnap ladders, locks of baby Lindberg's hair. I had to fight my way through the crowds. These were not the crowds from my barnstorming days. These were not the crowds from Paris. These people were thirsty for a spectacle. The crime of the century had become the trial of the century, and it was nothing more than a circus. My wife and I, the freaks people came to gawk at. The courtroom was filled with reporters and the morbidly curious. I followed my wife as a witness on the stand. I gave my case to the prosecutors, but then I faced the defense attorneys. He began with what seemed like irrelevant questions. Had I closed off some road on my property my neighbors used to haul timber? Close off? No, I don't recall closing off any road on that property. Mr. Lindberg, have you ever heard of any hostility towards you in that neighborhood prior to the night of the kidnapping? No. He asked me to trace on a map my journey through the house the night of the kidnapping. Why were Ann and I were in Hopewell, New Jersey that particular weekend? Who knew we were staying in Hopewell until Monday? Who knew that I was flying back to New York on Tuesday? I answered as clearly as I could. Very few people know what I do. Mr. Lindberg, what about your dog? Was he attached to your son? I would not call the dog a particularly good watchdog. I don't recall hearing the dog bark that night. There was no indication from the dog that someone was prowling about the house. On and on he went. When did I arrive home? Where did I go? Were the servants disloyal? Where was I sitting? Could I see the stairway from where I was sitting? The front door? Could someone see me through the window? What was that sound you heard? What was that sound? What was that sound? It was boards. It was boards from a crate falling off a stand or a chair in the kitchen. Trying to get to the origin of the ladder, he asked if we had wood about our house. He even asked if the library shelves were made of wood. His questioning grew more and more far-fetched as he tried to contradict my story. Mr. Lindberg, from where you were sitting in the dining room, could you see the hole in the stairway? No. Well, if the front door of your home was opened, anyone could have walked up the stairway, into the child's room, taken him out of the crib, and left unnoticed, couldn't they? I don't think so. Well, it's physically possible. It's highly improbable, but it's physically possible. Yes. Yes, it's physically possible. Mr. Lindberg, since the investigation has gone on since then, have you ever heard it said that you were to be the one who was to be kidnapped? I have. He asked about the ladder. He asked if I believed that anyone could actually carry the child down that ladder. He asked about the servants in our home. He asked if I believed at any time that the Purple Gang of Detroit had been the ones who had committed the kidnapping, as police suspected. He asked about Violet Sharp. Violet Sharp was a maid in our home at the time of the kidnapping. She was questioned by police. When they called her in for further questioning, she drank poison and killed herself. He asked about Oliver Watley, our butler. He asked about any man except the person who was on trial, Bruno Hauptmann. Mr. Lindberg, what investigation did you make of the people working in your home? More importantly, Mr. Lindberg, what investigation did you make of Oliver Watley, your butler? I spoke with him and his wife. Mr. Watley has since died. Mr. Lindberg, what investigation did you make of Mrs. Gow, your son's nurse? Well, I spoke to her. She was highly recommended by my wife's family. Did you know that Mrs. Gow had two brothers? No. Don't you investigate all the people working in your home? I'm a very busy man. Did you know that Miss Dow had a brother who was in trouble in the state of New Jersey? I didn't know she had a brother. Wouldn't a father who really cared about his child be concerned about the backgrounds of the people working in his home? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, would a father who really cared about the well-being of their children be concerned about the backgrounds of the people who have direct contract with their children? Finally, the harassment was over. I left the stand. Another witness was called. Of course, when Hopman himself was called to testify, he denied being part of any wrongdoing, despite the police finding the marked bills in his home. Despite the police finding wood in his attic that matched the wood that was used to create the ladder, despite the police finding his handwriting and his particular misspellings matching the ransom note the night my child was kidnapped. This man killed my child. He was, as the prosecution said, the lowest animal in the animal kingdom and public enemy number one of this world, and the jury, they found him guilty. And on April 3rd, 1935, at 8:54 in the evening in New Jersey State Prison, Hopman was electrocuted. But he died maintaining his innocence. Nothing compared to what I can accomplish. There'll be plenty of time for you once I reach Paris, but I'll have none of you now. There, even the little shakes I can get in this tiny cockpit will drive you off. My feet, my shoulders, my hands. There'll be plenty of time for you, none now. I fight off sleep, but the fog seemed to be set against me. I had to fly up to as close as 10,000 feet to avoid the fog, but sleet started to form on the wings of my plane. I was forced to drop back down low, and then eventually had to fly around any cloud I couldn't fly above. Finally, the weather cleared and I got my first signs of life. It was a fishing boat, a man's face in the cabin window. I dropped down and, as I had tried to do many times before in the past, hold a shouted conversation. Which way is Ireland? He didn't respond. Come to think of it, he didn't speak English. Conversation is futile. But if there are fishing boats, land can't be far behind, and soon enough, I'm passing by Cape Valencia and Dingle Bay. It was 10 p.m. It was 10 p.m. and I saw my first signs of Paris. The lights of Rayfield. A welcome sight. I dropped down to 400 feet and circled the Eiffel Tower. I saw roads jammed, packed with cars, hangars in the distance. I circled the field once more and caught into the wind for a landing. But as I moved forward, I was confused about what I saw. It was a sea. A sea moving towards me. A sea of people. Thousands and thousands of people had waited for hours to watch my plane touch down, and now they charged forward to touch the plane. And more than just touch, I began to hear the snap of fairing strips as they were ripped off the Spirit of St. Louis. I feared for the plane's safety, climbed out and called out for help, for someone to protect the craft, but the only thing that was replied back was my name, chanted over and over again. I was lifted up onto the shoulders of the people and passed along as if floating on the sea. This was Paris. This was my goal. But the celebrations in Paris, well, that was just a taste of the parades in New York City. 4 million people, that's what they say. 4 million people came out to welcome me back home. People leaning forward as I rode down the Canyon of Heroes. Oh, outstretched on their balconies all the way up into the skies, letting down a rain of ticker tape. An amazing spectacle that echoed the flowers thrown for conquering heroes of ancient Rome. For me, what have I conquered? I have conquered fear. I have conquered time and space. I have conquered the Atlantic Ocean. United States of America. When I flew high above the earth and looked down, I felt godlike. But no more. Now I am back down to earth, with you, here and now, to do what we must do now. It is our turn to guard our heritage from Persian, Mongol, and Moor. Aviation is a gift from the gods to those Western countries that others only try to copy in mediocre fashion. Aviation is a barrier between the teeming millions of Asia and the inheritance of ancient Greece. Aviation allows the white race to live at all in a pressing sea of yellow, black, and brown. If you stand opposed to the intervention in this war, now is the time for your voice to be heard. Now is the time for you to say, America first! America first! We went to war. After Pearl Harbor, we went to war. The America First Committee faded into the history books. I flew for the United States during that war, even downing a few Japanese planes. But after, here, in this spot called Kipahulu in Hawaii, I built a simple A-frame house. And this was a place I could finally find some peace, a place I could escape. Escape from what? Attacks. There were so many attacks, labels that still cling. You've heard them. Anti-Semitic, controlling, child killer, eugenicist. But what did they say when I died? President Ford said that the daring and courageousness of my Atlantic flight will be remembered for all of history. He said that the selfless and sincere man that I was would make me one of America's all-time greatest heroes. I was a pioneer for the modern air age. America loves its heroes, its successes. It forgives us because we reach heights that ordinary men couldn't even dream of. The last few days of my life, I spent my entire time planning. Planning it all, the grave, the epitaph, the tombstone. The epitaph reads, "If I should take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea." A few steps from my grave, you can see that very ocean. The quote is a psalm saying that where I go, I will be in God's presence. It says, "O Lord, thou hast searched me." He has searched me. He knows. And what he knows is not for others to know.